Welcome to part 2. In order to improve written performance in the classroom or in other environments, the following suggestions are recommended. Make sure the person is positioned at a desk or table so that they can produce maximum function. And by that I mean the correct body position for a seated task, an upright seated position on the chair with the feet flat on the floor and under the desk, and the chair pushed under the desk or table. You want to look at the way the person is grasping the writing implement, so the pen or the pencil, to see if that is functional. If they are keyboarding or writing, notice the lighting and also the color or the contrast of the background of the surface they're looking at and where they're typing or writing. Those things are very important in written work production. Another thing we need to talk about is modifications versus accommodations. Now, when we first learned about how to adapt activities way back in foundations, we use the term adaptation, but there's some subcategories of that really come into play when we talk about adapting for written work output. In the school system, the term modification is often used to mean grading, like making something harder or easier, that sort of gradation. And the word accommodation is frequently used instead of the term adaptation. So you'll see those terms on someone's IEP, and when that IEP calls for a modification to what's being taught, the child is taught and often tested on something really different than his classmates. It's, in short, the curriculum has been modified or changed. Now, in contrast to that, when the IEP lists the term accommodation and then lists specific accommodations that are to be allowed for a student, the child is taught and tested on the same content as classmates, but may use alternative materials and or strategies to take in or produce output related to the material. Assistive technology now can be used either as a modification, so it can be used to make something harder or easier, even if the content is different from what other people around are doing, or it can be used as part of an accommodation, and that means that the activity has been adapted. It's very important that the IEP and other documentation clearly indicate for which purpose the AT materials or strategies are to be used. And everybody involved needs to be aware of that intention so that the child's participation is consistently supported as the IEP team intends. This really relates back to the blog post that I wrote, especially part 1, talking about what is the purpose of doing a learning activity in class. So say like a worksheet. What is the purpose of that? Is it learning to draw circles? Is it learning to practice handwriting? Or is it learning information or demonstrating knowledge or understanding of information like words that start with P or types of animals or weather? Knowing that and having that clear learning objective understood by the teaching staff is really important when we look at what type of AT we're going to need to support the learning and written output of a child with a disability. So an example of this might be for someone who has a written output challenge, instead of bubbling in the answers on a Scantron, or instead of having a child write their spelling words on a paper, when what we're really testing there is their ability to spell, we need to look at other ways to measure that learning. So you could have the child call the spelling out loud. Also could show them a list of alternative spellings for a certain word. And then when the teacher calls out the spelling word to the whole class, that child, instead of having to write maybe the word house, instead of having to write House, they look at the choices on a page and then circle or highlight or put an X by the one that they see as the correct spelling. You also might set it up so that the student is provided with copies of notes, and maybe put some fill in the blanks here and there to keep them engaged, or have them use a highlighter or use a note-taking guide so that their writing output expectations or demands are decreased according to whatever their needs are. Might have them use a computer or a tablet like an iPad with a touch screen. Might allow them to use an audio recording device. Might provide for them specially lined paper, or colored paper that decrease the visual demand or the glare on them. Those are just some ideas of ways to provide accommodations so that the same material or information is being taught and then assessed, but just with some variations to provide that just right challenge. Many studies have shown that given the right challenge, and when the implementation has been done correctly, so in other words, when the teaching staff is trained on how to use a certain type of assistive technology correctly, that technology can affect significant increase in abilities for students with disabilities. But here's the rub on that. Just providing the teaching staff or even just a student with an AT device doesn't guarantee any increase in skill. Integrating AT materials in any form in the classroom needs to be done by considering the process as well as the product. This is very important and often can be a reason for an AT device or materials not working for somebody if the training and check-in is not done correctly or at all. Let's watch this short video clip.
Writing. Most of us use it a little bit every day and for a variety of reasons. We write to record events, we write to remind ourselves of things, and we write to share exciting news. We write to transmit information, we write to express our feelings, and many of us write to tell stories. Love stories, war stories, and stories with evil villains. But for individuals with written output challenges like dysgraphia, the act of writing itself can be the biggest villain of all. Derived from the Greek word dys, meaning impaired, and graphia, meaning making letter forms by hand, dysgraphia is a learning disability that interferes with written expression. Dysgraphia can manifest in many different ways. Some people with dysgraphia have handwriting that is illegible and shows irregular and inconsistent letter formations and spacings. Others write legibly, but find spelling and getting thoughts down on paper to be a grueling task. In all cases of dysgraphia, writing requires inordinate amounts of energy, stamina, and time. Dysgraphia can and often does interfere with a student's ability to express ideas, and as a result, they end up producing work that does not reflect their true ability. Writing requires a student to synchronize many mental functions: organization, memory, attention, motor skill, and various elements of language. Automatic and accurate handwriting is fundamental to the success of this multitasking feat. But for students with dysgraphia, the complexity of remembering where to put the pencil and how to form each letter exhausts all their mental energy before they're able to get down everything they meant to say. In schools, dysgraphia can cause low classroom productivity, incomplete homework assignments, and poor self-esteem. Fortunately, there's a wide range of assistive technology tools that can alleviate the handwriting burden, so that students are instead freed to focus on the content of their written work. Some of these tools help students circumvent the actual physical task of writing, while others facilitate proper spelling, punctuation, grammar, word usage, and organization. Tools range from the general to the specific and offer varying levels of support. From standalone word processors, spell checkers, and word prediction software, to more sophisticated programs which merge general tools with capabilities like speech-to-text, text-to-speech, handwriting interpretation, and audio-visual synchronization. Some examples of these tools include Kurzweil 3000, Dragon Naturally Speaking, and the LiveScribe Smart Pen. Developments in assistive technology can now free students from the burden of handwriting, so they're able to focus on exploring their creativity, expressing themselves using a robust vocabulary, and organizing their thoughts much more easily. Regardless of ability, all students have individual strengths, limitations, interests, and experiences. As such, a technology tool that is helpful in one situation or setting may be of little use under different circumstances. Careful analysis of the dynamic interaction between the individual, the technology, the task at hand, and the context is critical to selecting the appropriate technology to meet a student's need. With so many products available to alleviate or entirely bypass the handwritten element of writing, assistive technology can unlock the doors to learning and writing for students who have been restrained by dysgraphia, helping them to overcome that evil villain so that their story has a